Thank you. Well, I'm a book designer, typographer, also editor, design writer, various other things. But I've done some multi-script and multilingual type book design myself, but the subject is fascinating. First of all, as a book designer, I'm I'm a reader. I care about the page. I care about what the book is about. The whole point of book design is to bring the author's ideas and words and make and communicate them. It's not to show off as a book designer. It's in fact with a book that's text. If I've done my job right, nobody even notices. Perfect. Uh, well, it's not a good image. There are many different formats for pages. One of the things I always think about as a designer is how is it going to be bound? So like you might notice a rather large gutter on this. That's because it was going to be bound fairly tightly, so it would be readable. This is just regular in English. This is not actually a book, but it's a nice example of common multilingual design in Europe, where it's quite common to have multiple scripts, or rather multiple languages, usually not multiple scripts, usually the Latin alphabet. My first time in Europe was in Switzerland, where everything was in three languages, or four if it was English, or three if it didn't use Romansh, you know. Um, but so, and this is a case where it's just parallel columns. They're treated the same. That's quite common. That's often what you want. Um, they won't necessarily come out the same length. That's always something to keep in mind. But this is all Latin script. This is all European languages. Piece of cake, right? Basically. Um, but you have a very long history of printing with multiple scripts. I mean, from the beginning. Uh, this is obviously in Latin and Greek and alternating paragraphs. They're not mixed in the same line. I don't think they are at any point. Beautiful Renaissance typefaces. So they fit together, but Greek, especially that Renaissance Greek, which is highly stylized with lots of ligatures, has a very different color and texture from the Latin. I think they work well here, but you have to think about that. How will they work together? How will they contrast or complement each other? I just love the fish. Um, this is a case where actually the Greek is run in. It's the first word, and the rest of it is in Latin. And then down at the bottom, there's another Greek word in the line. So again, think about how it looks, how it reads. Does it need to stand out, or does it need to blend in? What's the purpose? I'll come back to a little bit about the fonts used. So this is an image that Dell had that's multi-script, multilingual, and I think basically done for fun rather than function, I would say. And I don't, for instance, the Japanese is horizontal. It would have been more interesting if it was done vertically, which can be done. Whereas here we have Latin turned on its side. I think that's just for fun. But page layout can vary. And in fact, one of the things you want to think about if you have different blocks of the page or page spread for different languages is what's the flow through? How is the reader who's reading one language going to go to the next page? I didn't have an image, but there is a book about type that has, I think, French, English, and German, and maybe another, where it's not obvious. You turn the page and your eye goes to the wrong place. So think about it from a user standpoint. Be a user. You are a user. And then, of course, you have vertical scripts. And this is just not a book again, but a beautiful image of treating two different languages and two different scripts in radically different but parallel ways. It just, they do not have to be treated the same by any means. I am assuming that the Arabic at the bottom is the same text basically as the English, but I don't know. And obviously Arabic is the more important here, or it wouldn't be so much more prominent. This is more parallel, parallel columns of text. Now, this was a book that I did back in the 90s. It was a book of poetry by Ho Xuan Hung, who was a Vietnamese national poet. She was an aristocrat. She wrote highly erratic poetry, but it was all subtext. But she wrote in the old Vietnamese writing system, Chu Nong, which is based on Chinese, but diverged 1,000 years ago. However, it is almost unknown in Vietnam today. There's an institute for keeping it alive, but the Latin alphabet, because of both missionaries and then later the communist government for readability, both directions, from both directions, the urge to use Latin came together because it was so much easier to spread literacy, even if there are a hell of a lot of diacritics. So for this book, it's translations on the right in English, Vietnamese on the left, in Chu Nom first, and then in modern Vietnamese. And just to show you what they look like. But I had to think about how on the page to treat those three elements in a way that made sense. And there was no font for Vietnamese Chu Nom. It had never been done in lead. It had been woodblock print or nothing. So this font was created by a professor at NYU, a Vietnamese professor. Had a few glitches still because he was still working on it. There were a couple of cases where I had to say, hey, would you just send me that character? I'll put it in, it will print right. I also modified the font on the right, which I didn't have a Vietnamese version, so I sort of faked that. Neither of these things would be needed today. Well, actually, I don't know if there's a Chu Nom functional font, but I hope so, yeah. But this was what it was like 30 years ago when we were just dealing with how to do this, for Christ's sake. Now, the main thing I want to talk about is this book that is almost complete. I've been working on with Mamoun Sakal. He's a wonderful Arabic type designer in Seattle. His daughter Aida is a software engineer, and she's the one that makes sure that the fonts work. This is actually a religious book. I'm neither Muslim nor religious, but it's commentaries on the Quran, the hadiths. And so it had to be Arabic and English. A lot of things were translations of Arabic into English. Other stuff like the right-hand page is just commentary, English translations of the commentary. And there were a lot of different kinds of elements. They wanted to run them continuous. They did not want to have en face, face to face. It's a long book anyway. And I had to figure out how to distinguish, or we had to figure out how to distinguish quotations from the Quran, which get a certain kind of centered treatment that's traditional, quote translations of, or commentary and then translations. So some of this is flush right, some of this is flush left. I mean, quite apart from the direction of the language. I'm just thinking about how to distinguish the elements. And one of the things I did, for instance, on the top of the right page, I just, for that, they wanted that centered, which is not the way I would do it. But to make it not look weird, I built in a little space on either side of that paragraph style. You can imagine that working with a very long list of styles and trying to get them applied consistently that's what happens. So this is just a close-up of that beginning of the first chapter. So you can see, I mean, Mamoun's typeface, Sakal Kitab, is beautiful. I cannot judge how readable it is, but it certainly looks like it would be, and I understand it is. And we used Brill for the English because it had all of the underdots and things that you need for transliterating Arabic. Now, this was something Mamoun pointed out to me, that the top line of Arabic is standard modern Arabic. The bottom is Quranic Arabic. So the style is the same font, enabling some textual alternates and styles at the bottom line to distinguish them. Now, that's not obvious to me until he drew it to my attention, but it would be to any Arabic reader. And then we ran into bugs. One of them, actually, both of them had to do with footnotes and numbering. This, we discovered that applying the right numeral style to the numerals in footnotes and in page numbers was not working right. And it would be, you would get things like page 111, those should be identical ones, but no, the third numeral would lose the formatting, no matter what we did. It is a genuine bug. John Hudson said yesterday, "Oh yeah, we saw that too. We reported that. That hasn't been fixed." And then this book had a zillion footnotes, and if we had numbered from the beginning to the end of a section, it would have gone into 3-digit, if not 4-digit footnote numbers. I happily discovered something I hadn't known, which is in InDesign, you can set it so the footnote numbering starts again at 1 every time you turn the page spread. Very useful. But we still had multiple digit. So this slide was sent to me by Ida. It was what they used to report the bug. And the other bug, which I would never have seen, but is very bonkers, is that if you're in a numbered list, numbered paragraph, and you have a footnote reference in that paragraph, if it has parentheses or a thin space, everything after that, the positioning of the dots is wrong. If it doesn't have either of those, or if it's not a numbered list, it works fine. So this is the close-up of those two. Now, you have to look closely if you're not an Arabic reader, but for instance, look at the reading from right to left. Look at the last character before the footnote and then the last character at the end of the line. The dots are in entirely different places. All wrong. At the bottom, they're consistent. And this was if, let's see, this is where it works correctly. So some fun. Any kind of a multilingual book you may, or multiscript book especially, you may run into this kind of problem, just unexpected bugs. You need to have, for one thing, somebody that's reading it over and proofreading it recognizes it, both in terms of the text, but and in terms of typographically. You know, I'm going to spot anything in the Latin, but I'm not going to spot the Arabic. So the other thing that I'm coming back to a little bit in designing books is deciding what typefaces to use. Do they work together in different scripts? This is different scripts particularly. Do they have an X height? Do they look like they have X heights and fit together, be parallel looking? Is there a baseline, or is there a top line or a medial line? And how do they work? How do they use caps and lowercase? What about the size of the numbers? Do they fit? I mean, it's all too common these days in American books, at least, to use a nice old style typeface like Adobe Garamond, but use lining numerals because it's the default. And that doesn't work at all. Should never be used for an old style typeface. Shouldn't even be in there, except if it's all caps. I take it back. And of course, we all know there are many, many arguments in pretty much every script about whether typefaces should be harmonized to work together or should contrast. I'm not going to get into that, but it is obviously an important question. What to use for what your purpose is, who your readers are, who will like it or not. I just grabbed this from some of the Microsoft Office fonts. I wrote the font descriptions for pretty much all of these, especially interesting the ones where I don't read the script. I researched a lot, but it just shows you what is possible. Nyala, that Latin is designed to go with the Amharic, or within the Latin. They're designed to go together, is my point. Some of the other ones they would take, and I think the Hadassah Freelander, same thing. Vijaya obviously uses Times Roman or something like it for the English. You get down to the Batang and Batang Che, which is Korean. The Latin, well, I guess it's true of both. The top line is proportionally spaced. The bottom line is monospaced, which looks like hell in the Latin. Actually, I don't like the Latin font anyway. But so that's the thing to think about. What would you want to use in a book? Sanskrit text there from Type Works. I just wanted to show just show how they designed them to go together. And this I took from Adobe Myriad Hebrew, which Robert Simbach designed. And the questions were how to deal with the numerals. So they actually have multiple versions. The first question was how to deal with the height of the Hebrew versus the height of the lowercase or the uppercase of the Latin. So the Hebrew is somewhere in between, so that when they run together, they work together. It would look too tall if it was the same height as the caps, but it looked too small if it was exactly the same as the X height. And then I believe the font has 3 different kinds of numerals. The mixed script or universal figures, which are sort of intermediate height, and they look like Western, not Western, but Latin figures, numerals. And then there are Hebrew height numerals designed for just Hebrew, and there are Latin numerals, which are not old style, I'm afraid, but so that's the kind of thing to think about when you're looking at a font for use. How does this work? Everything is about how does it work on the page or the screen or in AR and VR, but that wouldn't be a book so far. So that's it. Thank you.